Unless you're in it, sometimes you don't think about it. Poverty in America. It's a bigger problem than ever. We have the statistics to point that out. We have a United States congressman and an expert from Rutgers University, and we're talking about a new promise coming from the federal government right now, right here. Hi, everybody. I said that if you're not in it, you don't think about it. And unfortunately for most Americans who eat 3 meals a day, who have education, who have housing, who have a roof over their heads, they don't really think about people in poverty. But it's a growing problem in what's considered to be one of the most wealthy and richest nations in the world. That's why we have Congressman Chaka Fattah of Philadelphia here with us today. He has represented his district for 20 years. Are you the longest serving congressperson in Pennsylvania? Almost?
Well, there's one with the exact same seniority as me. But it's a pleasure to be here with you. It's a tough subject, but I'm here to tackle it.
Well, thank you for joining us. And Dr. Paul Jargowski, professor at Rutgers University in Camden. He is the director of Rutgers Center for Urban Research and Education. He's got some information today that I personally think, will astound you. Now, first of all, let's get to the reason why we're here on this program. Promise zones announced by the White House. You were one of the most powerful catalysts in the nation, if not the most, to bring these zones to America. And let me give you a map before we talk about it. The 5 zones are located in Philadelphia, the Mantua neighborhood, West Philadelphia, San Antonio, Los Angeles, 8 counties in southeastern Kentucky, and finally the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. What is a promise zone? When does it start? And what's it supposed to do?
It's a focused effort by the federal government to take areas of the country where people are living in the shadows and give them real opportunity in terms of educational opportunities. We got to break the cycle of poverty and the aggregation of poverty. And this is a focused effort that will take all of the federal resources that are available and give these communities a leg up. And there are different types of communities, urban areas, rural areas, like you've mentioned, in different parts of the country. We want to find approaches that work. In Philadelphia, we're going to have the best in the country, connecting up Drexel with the People's Emergency Center, with all of the community organizations that have worked in the Mantua area, and focus with a gigantic push to make sure that these young people get an education. Because we know something. If you get to be over 25 and you have a college degree in America, we have literally full employment. You don't have people who are doing well who are involved in antisocial activity, generally speaking. And we know that if we can get these people headed in the right direction, we can turn this entire circumstance of generational poverty around.
Now, before we get to the professor, is this money, are these grants money, or are they connecting people? Is this the Great Society, 1965, 1966, all over again?
This is real money,
right?
Both in terms of the community, but it's also connecting people. That is creating real, tangible human connections between adults and younger, successful young adults with young people and families in this community, one by one. I walked this area with John Fry. We've already started, the president of Drexel. I know the great work of Farah Jimenez at the People's Emergency Center. This is about bringing the institutions to bear on a problem that can be solved, and we know it can be solved, and we want to help lead the country in that way.
Professor, let's talk about the problem in general.
Yep.
You study this specifically in your life. This is your expertise. We got some figures here, but beyond the figures that we receive, why is poverty here in 2014 still the same kind of problem, or maybe even bigger than it was back in 1966?
Well, we have a real change in the economy such that people with lower levels of education have less opportunities, and that has continued because of the deindustrialization, because of jobs being replaced by automation in some cases. Think about retail, how many more people buy their things now from Amazon, and it's all centralized. In a city like Philadelphia, you don't have as many storefronts and where people could be employed. So we continue to see widening inequalities. Those with education do well, but those who are at lower levels are doing worse.
Now, let's look at this figure for a second. This figure sort of shocks me. And, you know, some people out will say, oh, I'm a liberal. I believe money's the way. Pour money into it. Just throw money at it. Conservatives or middle-of-the-roaders may say, really? It's that bad? Are these people working? That's the big question. More than 11 million Americans now reside in neighborhoods where at least 2 in every 5 households live below the poverty line.
Right.
Are those heads of households?
Well, the 11 million is a total. There are these neighborhoods where the poverty rate is above 40% are really devastated neighborhoods. They're the kind of neighborhoods like the Promise Zone has been targeting. But the number of people, the 11 million, that's a vast increase from the year 2000. It's gone up 56%. So more people are not only poor in their own family income, but they live in neighborhoods surrounded by other poor people, which exacerbates all the problems of poverty.
President Clinton did some work on this. When he put a team of experts together, looked at what they call the aggregation of poverty. Not the fact that you have a single family in which someone's unemployed, but when you have a whole community in which opportunity to get a decent education, to get early childhood education, to have access to a quality library or get online, or to have the kind of medical attention they need. So you can have in Mantua, a few blocks away, a world-class children's hospital that people fly kids in from around the world to be treated. You can have a higher infant mortality rate in Mantua, which you could throw a stone at from Children's Hospital, because these families are disconnected from these resources. And this is why the president of Drexel said what he wanted to do, and we've now opened up, I was there, a center in the community to bring opportunities to the families there, to create business opportunities, to create employment opportunities and job training opportunities for people who literally have been the long-term residents of Mantua, and you've seen it in various iterations over the years. But this has helped to really empower people.
Well, goodness knows the young people of Philadelphia, without any casting any aspersion on teachers, many of whom are dedicated and educators who care. We've lost now, since I've been around here, maybe large portions of 2.5 generations of young people because of a lack of educational resources. Does it start with education and end with education?
Yes,
you suggested it did.
Education is crucial, and one of the problems is that when all poor families live in a limited number of neighborhoods, schools are based on neighborhoods also for the most part. And so these schools have to deal with lots of kids who are coming in who have problems in the home, who have lack of resources in the home. That makes those schools function worse, and then teachers leave, some children leave, and those schools spiral down. And as the school gets worse, the neighborhood gets worse because the people who can will leave. And then the school gets worse, and it goes around and around. And so that leads to a situation where in many of these high poverty neighborhoods, the kids just aren't getting educated. And they drop out because they know they're not getting educated.
So Larry, to make it simple, because it is very simple in some respects, what you have is a neighborhood that's been robbed of all of the opportunity. And what the Promise Zone is about is enriching it with opportunity. That is, to make sure that every single young person gets the very best opportunity for early childhood education, for a decent support through elementary and high school, an opportunity to go into college. So conservatives say, well, you can't mandate results. No one is trying to mandate a result. What we're trying to do is transfer aspirations that are held in higher income families to lower income families, and to make sure that we erase the cynicism.
So how's it done specifically? You mentioned the connection between the hospital, Drexel University. I'm sure the University of Pennsylvania will be involved at some point in this, and all the riches that we have in a community like that. The western section of Philadelphia near this neighborhood is loaded with some of the greatest educational resources in the nation. How do those resources get? I know they're team leaders. Each group will have a team leader.
It's going to be done almost like an old-fashioned political campaign. It's literally family by family, door by door, child by child, in this zone, to make sure that every single interest and effort can be made to empower that particular family. You may have a veteran in the family who's eligible for GI benefits. You may have a child who can get access to a college scholarship. You may have a family member who's got a small business interest in which there may be something that they could do at the school. I met a young lady who's now moved from having 1 building to 8 buildings in terms of a janitorial service at the university. So she's went from being someone who someone might have written off to a very well established businesswoman in our city now. Those are the kinds of opportunities we want to create.
I guess the big question is, and the congressman will have to answer this, but I'm just curious how you feel about this. In the Great Society and the various programs And I remember Richard Nixon had a program, sort of a federalism program. There were some programs over the years. How do you make it not just impressive on paper, but impactful in the neighborhood? I mean, that's hard to do, isn't it?
Well, it is, and one of the reasons is that as important as this program is, we are also have a development system in this country that is undermining these neighborhoods at the same time. So one of the reasons that we have such a high concentration of poverty in so many of these neighborhoods is that for decades now we've been building exclusive suburbs using exclusionary zoning. Higher income people can move out, middle income people move into the older suburbs, and the people left behind in those inner city neighborhoods are the poorest. And so we've built this pattern of neighborhoods. And one of the things that I like to say is that when you're in a hole, you should stop digging. We need to really take some control over the development of the suburbs, the pace of the development of the suburbs, and the exclusionary zoning. We need to have, in the long run, this will take time to change this pattern, but we need to sort of have a less concentrated pattern of low-income people. That way, they're not all in one city or all in one neighborhood, and they are more connected to the opportunity structure.
How long does this take? Is this a 2-year program, 3-year program? I mean,
Well,
you can't do it in a day. It's going to take a while.
Yeah. This is a new effort by this administration, but it's not a new idea. President Clinton had the empowerment zones. And when West Philadelphia won an empowerment zone in the West Parkside area, almost 20 years ago, was one of my first big successes as a member of Congress. And now we have a major economic activity there. We have the most successful shopping center almost anywhere in the country. We got hundreds of people employed. We got all of those abandoned vacant mansions along Parkside Avenue revitalized. So the point is, it will take time, it will take years, and this is even harder than fixing up a building or building a shopping center, because you're really talking about building human beings. You're really talking about taking young people wherever you might find them along life's path, including some of them have already engaged in antisocial or illegal activities, and you're trying to turn them around. But it can be done, and it's going to be done, and the hope of the country rests on these promise zones working. Because if they don't work, we won't do others.
How are they funded? I mean,
They're funded
is it a lot of money, or is it just enough money to get things going?
It's a little bit of money to get things going, but when things get going, there's a lot of money available.
And what's the money for? I'm always curious when I see a federal program.
So, for instance, the first big grant they won $600,000 anti-crime effort. Because one of the things you have to do if you want to create opportunities, if you want young people to go to the Boys and Girls Club on Haverford Avenue in Mantua, you got to make sure it's safe. So, anti-crime activities are going to be one layer. There are housing efforts. There are other efforts. This will give this community a leg up in chasing federal grants so that they can create more opportunity.
Yeah, interesting point here. There was a piece last Thursday in the Philadelphia Inquirer about the millennials, the young people who moved into Philadelphia. And there's sort of a chain reaction here, isn't there? If somebody moves to Philadelphia, and let's say they move into the row home area of South Philly, or they move to West Philly, and they're getting good buys, and getting opportunities, the one thing that will get them to move out, the one factor that will get them to move out is education. And if the education, there was a great piece on it. Some of them are thinking about moving out as fast as they moved in. So if the education gets better, not necessarily in their neighborhood, if the education moves on and becomes better, that increases doesn't that make the whole city healthy? If you look at that?
Yes, that's right. I think education and crime are the two factors that really influence whether people are willing to live in the central city. And the fact that crime has been down has helped to some degree some gentrification occur. But if the crime rate were to go back up, or if the couples, the people that have moved in now or have children of school age, they begin to reconsider. And if the schools aren't there, they will leave.
It's an election year, and a lot of politicians are talking about re-election and opportunities and ideas. We have a lot of congressional seats open. How does this impact on the debate about urban and suburban areas? We'll get right back to you right after this. North Philly, right, a little bit.
Larry, we're going to try and do promos now during the break.
Sure. So you've tied for seniority in Pennsylvania.
Stand by.
Isn't that amazing? I'm still the young congressman from
3,
Philadelphia.
2.
A 20-year veteran of the U.S. Congress, a distinguished professor, take a look at the new promise zones. What do they mean to city and suburban areas? We'll take a look at the president's new initiative, how it might have a contagious effect on bringing enterprise and happiness to the people of our Delaware Valley region. Sunday.
That was a little too long.
It's your fault.
My fault.
Yeah.
I ran out of fingers.
No, you're right.
Yeah, fine. 3, 2.
A new program, a new initiative designated for one Philadelphia area and 7 others around the country. It's called the Promise Zone. There is an opportunity, a promise, to make life better, a quality of life through the interconnection of agencies and success. When we join you right here Sunday.
Close enough, they say.
Okay, let's
And
do that
one
again.
for 2 nights.
What's that tonight?
2 nights. Stand by. 3, 2.
Why has a populated section of Philadelphia been included in 8 promise zones across the nation? Well, primarily because of the activities of a local congressman who joins us to talk about the real promise of what could happen, and a distinguished professor who is an expert in this field when we join you right here tonight.
Close enough, they say.
Okay. You know, it's interesting. There's something. Well, we have our experts here, Dr. Paul Jargowski and distinguished Congressman Chaka Fattah. I go way back with Chaka Fattah. I remember before he was old enough to run for office, I think. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's take a look at some of the statistics now. These statistics are really staggering. Poverty in 2012. Philadelphia has the #1 percentage of poverty toward the entire population, with 405,000 people. Phoenix, 354. Chicago, 636. Remember, Chicago's population is bigger, but our percentage is higher. Dallas, 293. And Houston, which claims to be the #1 city in the country, the #4 city only because it expanded and gobbled up suburban communities to try to beat us out. Mm-hmm. But look at that, 26.9%, 27% of a city. Mm-hmm. That's 1.6 million. That's a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I mean, and if you think of the impact of that poverty on the people who are not engaged in problems and the people who do have opportunities, and it behooves the people who do not have those opportunities to want to have that work.
Yes.
I would think.
It absolutely is a drain on the entire society, and one of the reasons that we did, as a country, so well after World War II was that the GI Bill and other things, my father's generation was able to become middle class, and by doing that they bought things, and they started businesses, and they bought washing machines and dryers, and all that stimulated the economy, made work for everybody. If we now have this larger group of people that is not being connected to that economy, and as a result, it slows down our rate of growth, and so everyone is affected.
Well, I went out and visited a high school in Northeast Philadelphia, George Washington High School. 58 different languages being spoken in the homes of the children who attend there. We have people who come from all over the world. They've settled here in Philadelphia. Philadelphia has been a big part of the country's history. Mm-hmm. We had to make a case that we're going to be part of the country's future, though. Mm-hmm. And the only other list you'll find us at #1 on is we are #1 in terms of the cities with the highest group of adults without a college degree. That is, there's a connection between not getting a college degree and falling below the poverty line, right? Because you can't, in the society we live in now, make a good living, navigate your way through this economy if you don't have the ability to think critically, to communicate well, and to compute. You can't do it. And we got to get more of our young people who may in the past thought they were going to work in a manufacturing plant or an apparel factory. They may work in a plant, but they're going to need to bring college level math skills. And they're going to have to bring these skills that we need to transfer if we're ever going to break this cycle of poverty.
Well, there's another connection to this too. We recently had a discussion about the cost of college education. The cost of college education, the way it's going now, only 10% of American families may be able to afford college education in 20 to 30 years from now. So how do you go into a poverty zone and get those kids into college? It's pretty tough.
Well, it's tough, but we have to make a way because, you know, the people we're competing against, and competition is great. We're competing against China, India. These are billion-plus populated countries. We got 300 million Americans. We can't write off a third of our population or a quarter of our population as a nation and have the people. We need more people rowing. And we need to get people the kind of educational skills they need so that they can do the jobs that are going to be as part of our economy. I visited 30th Street, a post office, years ago. There were 30 people sorting out the mail. Now you go to look at this same operation at the new post office, there's one person because the computer is reading the barcode. These jobs are changing, and we have to get our young people to get better prepared to take on jobs, especially from impoverished families.
I know you're not an expert on this particular piece of legislation
Right.
or for the executive program, but from what you see of the interconnectivity of this program, does it look good to you? Do you think it has a chance?
I think it's an excellent thing to do because people who are currently living in these high poverty neighborhoods are really suffering and they need an additional help. But that's the inside game. But we also have to think about the outside game, about why are we creating so many of these neighborhoods. So I think we need to move on both tracks. And to get back to that point about education, in the 70s when I was college age, I came from a blue-collar family. We didn't have a lot of money. I was able to go to Princeton and pay very little. I borrowed a total of $900 because there were grants, there were scholarships, and over the years we've changed from a grant and support system to a loan system. And now it's so hard for lower income and working class kids to be able to get the kind of education they need without incurring enormous debts. And I think we have to really look at that situation.
All right, this is what we need to know, is that there's a college for these kids to go to. Like, I went to community college. It's affordable. But you also have at the upper end, the Ivy League schools. University of Penn now has a completely need-blind admission policy. You could be the poorest kid in the city. You get into Penn, you will not have $1 in loan in your portfolio. We need to be communicating these opportunities to our young people. That's what we're going to do in the Promise Zone. We're going to make sure that every kid knows about AmeriCorps and City Year and the Core Philly scholarships and the Pell Grants. You got to burden these families with the opportunity that they have to at least get their kids to escape this generation of poverty.
I think one of the great treasures of American life right now that a lot of people are not looking at is the community college situation, whether it be in Philadelphia, Montco, which is a very successful community college.
Karen Stout is the great president.
I mean,
there.
really, you know, and Delco and Bucks. And when you look at these institutions, I did the graduation a couple of years ago. I was the commencement speaker. And I have to tell you, out of the commencement speeches I've done, it was the most fun. And the reason it was the most fun, because I realized that a lot of families, gave me chills, to see a lot of families seeing their kids graduate from a college for the first time. And it's fair, I mean, nothing's reasonable to someone who doesn't have money, but it's a great way to get to where you want to get to. I mean, community college in Philadelphia is an unsung institution, don't you think?
It is, and it is, it's paid for in part by the taxpayers of Philadelphia who are making this opportunity available. We need more of our young people to take advantage of it. I do an annual fundraiser, a golf tournament for the college for scholarships. We need to be doing more and more to move these young people forward. And what we need to do is not take a shotgun approach, excuse the pun, but take a rifle approach. That is, we're saying, let's take every kid in Mantua and make sure that they know about every single opportunity to help them navigate life's highway.
I have to ask you a question. When I first started covering you and your family, your mom was involved in really effective anti-gang and anti-violence issues around this, what was that, 70s?
70s.
So-
The No Gang War in 74 campaign.
Right. And they eliminated the street gangs, the turf gangs of Philadelphia. There's a lot that was done. When you look back at your life and 20 years in the United States House of Representatives, which we can talk about some other time, dissecting the House would be a fun show. Do you think that when you look at these stats, do you think that maybe government, in the big picture, has not done its job?
I think that we've done a lot of good, but it's overwhelmed by what is left to be done. And the reason for that is that I think there's been this kind of selective success. And what's different about the Promise Zone is rather than finding individual success stories, what you're going to do is raise the aspirations of an entire neighborhood. It's a much different approach. And what you're saying, that this is going to be a neighborhood in which achievement and success is going to be at the forefront, in that we did a study looking at kids in college in Pennsylvania and why Pennsylvania ranks 49th out of the 50 states in the number of our kids that are going to college. And what we found was that it wasn't financial aid, that the most important fact was the attitude of the adults around these children. And we got to change our attitude about what these kids can do.
Now, when you teach and you write papers and you look at a situation like this, do you think that among the young people you talk to, that they get this? I mean, do they get the need for a community that has to be maybe, if you want to call this a liberal approach, you can, but a program that has to be more caring about the people who have not, to make them have, so they can make the country more successful?
Yeah, I think the key is knowledge of the opportunities that exist, and one of the problems in these high poverty neighborhoods, the type we talked about earlier, where 11 million people live, is that when kids grow up in those neighborhoods and they look around, they notice that more than half of the men aren't working, they're not in the labor force. They look around and more than half of the families are single parent families headed by female. So that the norms in those neighborhoods are not mainstream norms, and so they think that's the way it is. And part of what this program will try to do, I think, is to sort of communicate more effectively that there are other things that they can do with their lives, and that there are opportunities and they need to be connected to them.
Soon we're going to take a look in broadcasting and journalism at the mayor's race in 2015. You're not running again, are you?
I'm not.
Okay, we know there's one candidate who's not running. You're one of the few. How big an issue is this? I mean, to be the number one rate of poverty in the nation compared to population. We only have a few seconds to solve a big problem, but it's big.
Look, if you got the least number of adults with a college degree and the highest poverty rate in the country, connect up the dots. We need to get more of our young people heading in the right direction. And it should be the number one issue in every race until we change these statistics.
Dr. Paul Jarkowski, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Chaka, it was a pleasure to see you. I've seen you through various generations. Now you're tied for seniority, powerful man. We'll keep an eye on you. Have a great night.